So we talked a little bit about daylight, OpenStack. Just want to touch a little bit upon some of the work that's going on in Open Compute. So we're members of Open Compute as well. They just started an effort around networking. And
what's going on with that one?
So it's an interesting space in that there's a good amount of every couple of months the press will do a new set of write-ups on there, but in terms of actual movement, in terms of actual movement, it's still the same three. It's the three merchant silicon vendors who have sort of made proposals out there, which we have yet to see which one sort of gets adopted for the first phase of here's what we want to standardize on.
So they don't even have the hardware reference architecture.
That's right. They have proposals. They have three proposals. They have yet to finalize on which one becomes the reference.
Okay. And they will get the software to put on that where exactly?
So most of the software is out of scope. That's actually funny, right?
Ooh,
so that's actually good, right?
So the tooth fairy will bring the software.
So Oni, which the open source bootloader has been donated into Open Compute. So a bootloader to be able to boot this Phantom OS is in scope. There is now an Open Linux distribution that is again just board bring up, and you can bring up Linux. It's got no networking features except the default Linux networking stack if you want to use that.
Yeah,
right?
That works really well.
Exactly, with no mapping to the ASIC, right? That's even better. But
wow.
Yeah, but that's kind of
you can do everything in CPU.
Yeah, yeah, I know. But there's a so that's where it's at right now. However, what's most interesting about OCP is really if you look at the users who are driving it, and between Facebook, some of the financials, some of the big web properties, it took them a little while, but they were able to make inroads on the server side, right? So there is now a standard design, and there are vendors who are building to that spec and making lots of money.
Yeah, but the software side of Open Server or Open Compute has been solved 15 years ago.
You're right. Yeah.
What will they put on the switch? Quagga?
Well, so that's another angle vendors are working on, right? So I mean, I think the ecosystem for switch operating systems is fledgling right now, right? And there's a couple of small startups in the space. There are vendors who certainly have the capability to disaggregate their OS. Should that happen? Yeah. I think it's a question of when does that market requirement trickle down to just beyond the 10 web scale guys, the 10 hyperscale guys, who are doing their own thing anyway, versus and it's also and most of it is also about sort of managing complexity and OpEx, right? So just because you can build it yourself doesn't mean you should. And my argument is most enterprises, even if they have the capability, don't want to take on that burden. They would rather call 1-800-HP and say, yeah.
Oh, that's a difference.
Yeah. See, and I think that's actually a fallacy. I think customers are turning away from that and returning to the sense that I'm getting from the people that I'm speaking to, the people who are talking to me and emailing me with questions. They're actually saying we don't want one vendor anymore. We want openness. And so the concept of using Cumulus Linux or some other open Linux thing is not widely done, but it doesn't mean you have to run it across your entire data center. It might be just a certain part. Maybe your dev test runs it, right? Up until now with tree structures, you've had to have one operating system everywhere.
No,
but it's changing.
Greg, sorry, how does replacing iOS with Cumulus Linux make it more open?
Makes it free.
Makes it what?
Cheaper. You can iterate faster because you're not wasting money on overpriced.
That's not the play for Cumulus, though. The play for Cumulus is integration into a shop that's already committed to Linux and has automation processes, and you just want to add your switch to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the fallacy is that people forget that Cumulus Linux is not free, is not open source.
No, you can say that. Just
so, replacing iOS with Cumulus Linux
is significantly cheaper and significantly
it's
flexible.
cheaper. Is it cheaper than Arista? Is it cheaper than the cheapest regular switch vendor?
Well, there's a lot of vendors now shifting to Broadcom OS, but what I'm saying is it's really about, instead of treating the entire network in the data center or the campus as one network, which is actually a fallacy, we're starting to see people take a more nuanced approach and say, I want to build a network for this here. This might be my dev test VMware. Yes. And if I can buy cost-effective products, I don't actually need to have one vendor across my entire data center. I might buy one vendor for this part, and this is my legacy existing infrastructure built with this tool here. But over here's another one which is just for this.
I'm curious, what size data centers are you looking at? Because my experience is that, at least in the US, that they're taking the path of least resistance. I mean, they will suck at the Cisco teat because that's just easy, and they don't want to think about, you know, and also in service provider world, when I tried to bring in other vendors, they resisted that because they didn't have the provisioning in place, and it would have meant like adding a whole.
So this is where the Cumulus comes in, which is the puppet and the chef. And I mean, HP with the same thing with their SDN, the VAN integration for them is actually it's more of a configuration capability to be able to configure any of the HP switches using the VAN controller.
And that's there for Juniper as well now.
Yeah. So you can actually now start to manage multiple vendors.
I believe that, but the problem is, I mean, I've worked one.
Anyway, we need to.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see that playing out in the last 4 places where I've been.
Sure.
So so I mean, again, you know, this is a topic ripe for sort of discussion and debate. You know, our take on this. I mean, as you can imagine, right? We've you know, we're involved. We have been involved on the OCP side, sort of, you know, right now still sort of monitoring and figuring out what the end requirements are, and those have to come from, you know, the folks writing the spec. And at that point, you know, like we did on the server side, on the data center side for Open Compute, you know, it's likely it's likely there's you know, there's a play there for vendors who are interested in making these choices available to customers. So I think it's still too early to say. However, with you know, it's just interesting to see open source hardware crop up now on the networking in the networking space, right? Software's been, you know, making inroads for a while now, and now.
Okay. Now, sorry to interrupt you, but how can you call hardware open source if you can't get the specs for the chipset until you sign 10 NDAs?
Yeah. See, now you're tugging at heartstrings, right? I mean, that's right. And if you're on the mailing lists, you'll find every time someone new signs up to the mailing list, their first question is, "Well, wait a second, you know, these APIs, I still need to sign NDAs to get. So how is this open, right?"
Exactly.
So I think there's a. I hope the chip vendors are listening, right? Because some of them have made some inroads here. So Marvell.
Intel publishes everything.
So Marvell actually is open sourcing all their chip APIs.
Oh la la.
As part of Open Compute.
You know what? The NSA already had it, so I guess they figured it out.
So you know, it's I think it's it's something that as customers start making more noise about, as vendors start making more noise about, it has potential to happen, right? It may not be. You know, I'll go back to my mainstay of abstractions, right? It may just be a group of people get together and build a HAL that can talk to.
There's many kinds of openness. There's an open VXLAN standard. Somebody published it to the ITF, but it's not a standard. It's just open, right? I'm not fussed about it being open source, just as long as it's open enough. that I can get the information I need to trust what I'm getting is.
Yeah.
I need visibility into how the sausage is made to at least know that there's 40% meat inside of the sausage instead of whatever else it is. That's
pink, pink slime, we call it.
Dirty joke.
Yeah. Well, the only way whatever you describe, what you described would happen is if the open switch people decide to go with Intel or Marvell because Broadcom wouldn't open source the specs.
Yeah.
That's the only way it would happen. Otherwise, Broadcom doesn't care. They have most of the market.
Yeah. So again, can't speak for any of those vendors, can't speak for Open Compute, but this is actually active discussion, and I think it would benefit from more user input, more people like yourselves, sort of piping in there. So let me just shift gears for the last couple of minutes we have here to SDN, something that you guys live and breathe, as do I, and what we've I just want to give you a preview of some of the things we're showing at the booth. So if you heard my rant about network virtualization, I've given this a few times now, but basically, network overlays, network virtualization, we've heard it all. Everyone's doing it. Where else can we use this stuff, right? And really, we've got a bunch of use cases and a bunch of applications, both in data center as well as sort of campus enterprise that we're showing. Some in the security space. There's QoS stuff. There's data centers. We have 5 partners who are demonstrating the apps they've built on top of our controllers in our booth. And in fact, it's fun. Eric and his team brought along this thing we're referring to as Padzilla. It's this 80-inch touchscreen that you can go and navigate. And I would really encourage you to sort of stop by, take a look. Everyone's always talking about where are the use cases? Where are the use cases for this stuff? And in this case, really all we did was provide a platform, and we let the app vendors sort of decide, right, how to use it. And some of them have come up with fairly neat applications. So we're gonna, as part of our ecosystem, they get some access to our go-to-market capability and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's about what problem they're solving. And they've got a set of really nice demos in the booth that I'd encourage you to go take a look at. In addition to that, right, we've got we sort of continue forward with building upon sort of SDN as a paradigm, right? It's not just about open flow. It's not about one protocol on the southbound, one API on the northbound. None of those things, right? I mean, even on the northbound side, we use this term. There's various latitudes and longitudes of APIs, right? Depending on where you want to consume them. And if you look anywhere in networking, right, almost everything has a northbound and a southbound. So the first thing when you talk about northbound APIs is northbound of what? We're starting to focus on, with a lot of partners in the industry, we're starting to focus on what's northbound off the controller, because that's where, that's the application surface that most app vendors and customers want to touch first. And so, a lot of good work going on there. And, I encourage you to, follow our activities, both, in ONF, some of the other standards bodies, some of the other stuff, we're putting out through our partners. Any questions?
Just mentioning, when you say follow our activities, some of us might be slightly busy every now and then. So if someone would be kind enough to push some information to us, either we would press the delete button or actually ask you something about what you're doing.
Okay.
But just, searching for information and following people, that's sometimes too time consuming.
Well, you've managed to develop a fan following. People follow you all the time, right?
One of the things, I just want to...
Please.
I pointing.
Yeah.
Great.
No, it's not relevant. I'll take it offline.
Yeah, so just Saro was just mentioning, so some of the SDN apps, we've been talking about them a lot, and you've probably heard us talking about this now called Network Optimizer, which is an SDN application for Link. And then we also have our Network Protector, which was in the last year was seemed to be referred to as Sentinel. We've now officially named it Network Protector. But those two applications are officially shipping and released as of Monday. So those are real. And then the other part, just to mention of our announcement from the SDN applications perspective, we announced also that we are doing a prototype for location-based services. We have an application called Smart Shopper, and that is being tested right now in the retail space. But the exciting part, and I know I'm in the techie audience, so the exciting part is really the underlying technology for the location-based services coming out of HP Labs. It was a project that was codenamed Cupid internally, and this basically allows us to get from a Wi-Fi, indoor Wi-Fi, gets us down into the 1 to 2 meter space as far as accuracy goes. So we've really, and with a lot less access points than most of the competition has been advertising. So we're not showcasing the technology in the booth, but we have some experts there from the wireless side, from my team and others, that are talking about this. The higher story is about the monetization apps that SDN brings, and the whole thing with this Smart Shopper application, which allows in a retail environment for a retail store to actually pop up messages if you're walking down a certain aisle, or if you're, there's many different applications. Think about if you're in a museum and you do, I know some of you are from Europe, but you do those guided tours and you have those silly headphones that you put on or things like that. Imagine for a museum to be able to actually know your location, and when you're in front of something, to be able to either stream audio or video or premium video and be able to monetize that application as well. So some pretty neat stuff and some neat technology that's coming out of HP Labs to allow us to get our accuracy down pretty tight.
Can you tell us more about that? Because that's also interesting, although I know nothing about wireless.
So yeah, we can get you more details. Like I said, I have a couple of folks from my team that are actual real wireless gurus that are in the booth. But this is basically allowing us, from a Wi-Fi perspective, it's not just triangulation. It's actually a bit more than that, and some stuff. I'll call it special sauce, although we're talking about it, that we're using to be able to just basically within where most vendors are using somewhere between like 20 and 20 plus access points to cover a space and do this, we're literally able to do it with like four to six access points. And so the accuracy, again, in the retail spaces, you can imagine if you're walking down a food store aisle, you can imagine if you've got a 5 meter range, you're probably in the wrong aisle. Someone's asking you for one, you're shopping for cereal, and you're getting something for diapers, for kids' diapers. That's not going to be good.
Not just skipping to the end game.
Yeah.